with that, we're going to get ready to move into our next session here this afternoon. We have our gold level sponsors up on the screen again. We saw some videos from these folks over the lunch break, and we'll have some again here this afternoon. Christensen Farms, Heartland Builders, Crystal Springs Hog Equipment, and Hog Slat Equipment, all gold level sponsors here today. With that, we are getting ready to move into our permitting, our regulatory, and our zoning discussion. Always kind of a hot button issue, an issue that we work on very closely here at AFAN. I want to introduce the folks joining us for this discussion. We have Dean Secchi with Secchi Agri-Services and Engineering up in Raymond. With Cailin Wall, he's with the Department of Environment and Energy for the state of Nebraska. And then we have Judy Mingery representing planning and zoning aspect of the discussion. So good afternoon, guys. And with that, Dean, I'll let you lead us off if you want to introduce yourself, introduce your company, and talk a little bit about what you do. You're going to have to unmute yourself there.
Let's try that again.
There we go.
Very good. Can you hear me now?
You're good.
Very good. Will, thank you for the opportunity, and we appreciate the time to visit with everybody today. And again, my name is Dean Secchi with Secchi Agri-Services and Engineering here in Raymond, Nebraska. We're in our 24th year of business this year, and serving the livestock industry throughout the Midwestern United States and a couple of foreign countries. And our business model is pretty simple. We do design, engineering, building, compliance, record keeping, manure, nutrient marketing, things that are associated with all the livestock producers that we've served for the last 24 years. We have a staff of about 42 people that range from professional engineers to agronomists to construction managers and everything in between. And so it's an honor for us to serve the livestock industry, and we appreciate the business that we're in.
Thank you, Dean. Kai, you want to introduce yourself and then your work for the department? We're having a hard time hearing you, Kai.
Go to somebody else.
Oh, hey, you're here now.
There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. No, my name is Cailin Wall. I'm the Ag Section Supervisor for the Department of Environment and Energy. And our role in kind of this whole thing is that we're the permits and compliance portion of everything. So anytime Dean's group or any of the other consultants across the state, when they design an operation, when they're working for you, they send those plans and specs into us. We review those. We write a permit based off of what we were seeing in those plans. And then just kind of as we move along there, we have staff that are out there doing compliance inspections just to make sure that everything is being done according to what the application says, and that we're staying in compliance. So our main goal is voluntary compliance and just being able to work with producers as much as we possibly can, just to ensure that we're not a heavy hand or anything like that, but somebody that can come along and just make sure that that we help you stay in compliance with what your permit says.
Perfect. Thank you. Judy, with Adams County Planning and Zoning, I'd like to welcome you to the program, and if you want to take a few minutes to introduce yourself and what you do there. Looks like we might be having a hard time getting Judy on the program here, so we'll let our IT folks work on. Judy, can you hear us? That's okay. We'll let our IT folks work on that, and then we'll just go ahead and get into the discussion here, since we've only got about a half hour for this group here. And again, want to remind folks, if you have any questions you'd like to submit, for our panel, you can do so through the Q&A function on your screen, and we'll field those questions. Dean, I'll start with you. You know, you've been in this business quite a while. You know, as people are working through the permit process, putting together their nutrient management plan, you know, going through the steps with the state, the county, what are really some key take homes that people need to keep in mind? Some things that people need to, you know, think about ahead of time in terms of that.
You bet. I'll start out with the county level, because I always tell our clients that we need to start at the county level, because the county has the ability to look and evaluate a permit on a case-by-case basis differently than the state does. And the county can say no in some cases. And so I always say, let's look at the county level first, make sure that we have our bases covered there, make sure that we can get approval at the county level, and then we'll move on to the state level. And so it's a two-part process that people need to understand, and it needs to go into that order typically. But the keys to a county permit, in our opinion, really are understanding the county zoning regulations, making sure that we have a comprehension of what those regulations say and understand how they interpret and how they apply to your individual situation and your operation. And then work with a consultant or an engineering firm that understands how to develop a good site plan that can be used for that county presentation and for that county zoning process. Those things are key, I think. And then, of course, the next step we always look at is establish lines of communication with the county zoning administrator. And we have Judy on here pretty quick, hopefully, and she'll talk more about that. But making sure that they understand what it is that you're doing, and making sure that you have a good comprehension of not only the plan, the application, but of course the people that you're working with. And of course, then the next steps are a little harder to accomplish, and that means going out and talking to your neighbors, making sure they understand what you're going to do, and getting them on board to that whole process. If you don't have neighbor buy-in, then you're going to have neighbors fighting you at those county zoning meetings. And we've been through hundreds and hundreds of these kinds of meetings, and some of them don't end well, and neighbor gets put against neighbor, and that's a very unfortunate situation. So we try to do everything we can to avoid those scenarios on the front end, open those lines of communication, and make sure that people understand what it is that you're doing, and they're not afraid of what you're doing.
You mentioned site selection and developing a site plan. You want to hit home how important that is in terms of selecting the right site and then laying out that plan, and how you know, how your team can help folks do that, maybe if they're evaluating different sites initially.
Yeah, site selection is the most important for a lot of different reasons. Number one being, where are we at in relationship to the other homes, whether it's your home or whether it's a neighbor's home in relationship to this facility. What effect are we going to have to the primary wind flow directions, things of that nature? What kind of effect will we have on that neighbor? And then the second part of that is, how are we siting this to make sure that we're putting it in a position that the topography, that the land, the resources around us, and the environment around us are going to be protected. Making sure that we're not too close to groundwater, making sure that we're not too close to surface waters, and making sure that we don't have problems with environment long term. And of course, the last part is, how do we utilize the nutrients coming out of this facility? So let's position it in a location that can take advantage and minimize that impact of the cost of application of manure long term back to the cropland.
Yeah, absolutely. Kai, I kind of want to bring you into this conversation. Walk us through, you know, what you do, you know, just from a high level. You know, if a producer needs to is required to apply for a permit through your office, just walk us through that timeline, what that looks like.
Yeah, you bet. Kind of when we start out with the whole process, everything starts with an initial inspection of every operation. So before there's ever a permit application submitted, we go out there, we take a look at the site, and just kind of gives a few ideas from our perspective of what could be key issues that they might be looking at, or as a producer might be looking at. And sometimes a consultant's involved with that, sometimes they're not. They're just getting preliminary stuff set up and going with you. From that point, you know, you'll get a letter back that either says that controls are required or controls are not required for the operation. So basically off that, once you get that letter back, you'll be submitting the application if a control is required, is part of that. And then from there, it goes to, we have 30 days that we have to give the NRD and the local county board to be able to review that application before we can even go to the actual public notice portion of it. So once they have that review, once 30 days is up, we're trying to get that onto public notice at that point. We have a 30-day public notice window there. And then once that comes off, if there's no public comments that are holding up the permit, we write the permit, and we have a statutory obligation to have every application out, or every permit out within 110 days of the application coming in. And so, I mean, we do really push hard to get the public notice through, get the application reviewed, get a permit out as quickly as we possibly can. A lot of times we are exceeding that 110 days. We're getting up there in that 80 to 90 day range is what we are really hoping to do when we get an application in.
So what are some things, what's some advice you would give producers that want to ensure their application gets processed in 80 to 90 days versus the 110 allowed by state statute? Are there, you know, perhaps mistakes or omissions that contribute to that? Or what are some things you see that can help keep that time frame down?
Usually a lot of times it's pretty minor stuff, and sometimes it just comes to whether it's a design thing at the site. You know, sometimes if there's something new that we don't typically see, sometimes that can make things go a little bit longer. But when we're dealing with like hogs, deep pit barns, or if we're dealing with shallow pits with holding ponds out there, those or storage pits, then a lot of the times those are pretty simple. Hogs actually are very simple for us to get permitted and get through. So things that hold us up a lot of times is if we get an addendum partway through that, oh, wait a minute, we wanted to change something with our design out here, whether it's expansion or, you know, we want to go deeper, or we want to go longer with the building, we want to try to have more hogs in there than what we originally had submitted for. Those are the type of things that really hold us up with the permitting, because then we got to go re-review everything all over again. So sometimes it's just minor things that we ask for when we send a letter back out saying that we're going to public notice with this. A lot of times there might be something minor like a well location or something that we can ask for in the letter there that doesn't hold us up at all. Some of that minor stuff or anything there, we still can push through with the permit and not have to worry about that. But sometimes if we have a incorrect design, or if the design doesn't meet our regulations, we have to submit a request for information. We start the process kind of over again. That 110 days really kicks back up then at that point if there's something that we can't public notice it. Those are the things that hold us up. Sure.
Thanks. It looks like we've got Judy on the program now. So Judy, I'm going to give you a chance to introduce yourself and kind of the work you do there in Adams County, if you will.
Well, I'm Judy Minry, and I'm sorry about that. A few technical difficulties there. Apparently, I'm not very IT techy, but I am the Planning and Zoning Director here in Adams County and have been for about 10 years. Prior to that, I worked for an engineering company and just grew up on a farm, and that's basically me. So basically here in Adams County, is Planning and Zoning Director, any applicants that come in with large livestock, more than 2,000 animal units, then we have to do a conditional use process. So they have to have a conditional use permit, basically.
Why don't you walk us through, now I know it's going to be different in every county. That's one of the intricacies of Nebraska. We have 97 different sets of zoning regulations or lack of zoning regulations depending on the county. But why don't you walk us through the process of how that looks in Adams County if the facility does require a CUP?
Well, in Adams County, basically by the time that they come here, they have probably, if it's a large facility, they have hopefully gotten a professional like Secchi Engineering to do the site design and those type of things, so that we know exactly where they want to put it, so that I know if it's, you know, meets the distance requirements. So then they would fill out an application for a conditional use permit. And then I have to advertise that for a public hearing, so I have to have that at least 10 days prior to our meeting, but I'd like to have it even longer than that That way I can do my research. I like to provide as many facts as I possibly can to the Planning Commission. We haven't adopted the matrix here in Adams County, but I do utilize that. I do have the applicant fill that out. I think the matrix is just a very good organized tool for individual applying for the conditional use permit for siting this site. It's organized, it answers most of the questions in the regulations that are the requirements probably across the state. So that way, at least they have an organized plan as to maybe some of the questions that might be brought up during the public hearing process. Then once application is advertised, and it goes before the Planning Commission at their meeting, and then later on to the Board of Supervisors. And that's also a public hearing process.
Judy, you brought up the livestock siting matrix, so I would throw this question to either you or Dean. Could you go into that a bit more for maybe some folks that aren't familiar with that, or that could, even if their county perhaps doesn't use that as part of their zoning process, how they could use that to evaluate their, I'd throw that to either you or Dean, because I know you both have experience with that.
Well, I'll go ahead and just add my 2 cents there. It's really easily accessed on the Nebraska agricultural website, so it's easy to get a hold of. It's free of charge. You just fill it out. That's basically it. Dean, please add to that.
Yeah, I would agree. What I like about it is it creates an objective way of looking at whether a permit should be approved or not, and it helps the board members use that in an objective way rather than a subjective way. And so anytime that you can create a black and white format to say, yeah, it either meets it or it doesn't, and it gives a quantitative definition to that, I think we really help those board members make better decisions based on science and fact rather than emotion. And so I think it has a very powerful impact for a county when it's used appropriately, and so it has a benefit.
Dean, earlier you brought up as we were talking about the zoning and permitting process, the importance of communication, not only communication with the county, but communication with your neighbors. I guess I'd just like you to hit home maybe on that a bit more, what you see throughout the state. Sometimes we hear stories on the news about opposition to livestock projects, and you and I have seen it firsthand many times, but just how important is that communication, in advance of the project, and what tips would you give to producers that are listening that may have a neighbor or a community member that has opposition to a project?
Yeah, we encourage all of our customers to go talk to their neighbors, and the ones that do are always typically successful from the standpoint of at least open communication. They may not get agreement from their neighbor, and they may have hesitation from their neighbor, but it prevents that neighbor from showing up at that county zoning meeting disgruntled and surprised, because that's the last thing you want them to show up. Now, they may show up and they may be upset and unhappy that you're placing a livestock facility somewhere in their neighborhood, but at least they're not surprised, and that's worth a lot in terms of not only the confidence that it shows from the customer standpoint of demonstrating what they're trying to do, but at the same time making sure that there's, you're not trying to pull anything over top of the neighbor type of a thing. And so those types of conversations are very, very critical, and the ones that are successful are typically ones that have a meaningful conversation with their neighbors ahead of time. And it's a very important step. It's a very difficult step. It's probably the most difficult step they're going to go through of all the things that they have to do in terms of getting a permit, whether it's at the state or the county level.
Is there anything you want to add, Judy, to that communications piece from your perspective?
That's exactly right. I think communication is one of the most important things. That way you can trust that individual. Everybody thinks somebody's trying to pull something over on somebody. At least if there's communication there, those neighboring farmers and stuff can start to see that there's maybe another outlet for their ag products than just what they were using. So communication is a great starting tool.
Absolutely. We do have one question here submitted, and I think this is probably for you, Kai. They're asking, what is the largest number of animal units that does not require an operating permit from your office? And perhaps that depends on the kind of management and the kind of manure management too. So do you, in terms of swine, do you kind of want to elaborate on when a permit is required?
Yeah, when it comes to hogs, once they hit the medium size operation, that's when what we're looking at for getting that. So if you stay a small, you can actually go and build an operation and not have to worry about it. So when it comes to hogs, I think that's at $6.99 for hogs that are over 55 pounds. I'd have to look at the weaned hogs. The weaned hogs, they're going to be under $2,999 and under. That's what it takes to be considered a small on that side of things.
Great, thank you. And again, just want to remind folks, if anyone has any questions for our panel or any panels throughout the day, they can submit those in the Q&A function here on the screen. You know, I think there's a lot of misconceptions and sometimes some, I don't want to say fear, but just, you know, a misunderstanding of the process that folks need to go through. We find a lot of people that they get nervous or uncomfortable about the permitting process, whether it be county zoning or through DEE. So I guess I'd just start with you, Kai. What advice would you give to producers that have some apprehension or are concerned about obstacles through the permitting process?
I think on our side of things, we typically try to work really well with producers. I think whenever you're working with a regulatory agency, sometimes there is a little bit of fear in coming in and talking to us. But I think if I looked at people who are kind of online here, and I think a lot of people would say the same thing that have worked with us, is that, you know, we try to be really good and pretty easy to work with, because our goal is we really want to make sure that people are in compliance, and we kind of feel that if somebody's kind of taking the path of being out there and not in compliance, that kind of falls back onto us. So I think that's kind of a big fear that some people have when they're going through the permitting processes. I think the typical thought of a lot of people too is that it takes forever to get a government permit. Well, my background, I mean, my family, we own businesses, and so I kind of understand the aspect of how important it is to get permits in a timely manner. So I kind of treat this position in itself as a business, and that I want to see how fast I can be active and be able to get permits out there for people as well too, and just be able to get that going. So I don't feel it's anything that has to take a long time to get some of these permits. And so I think sometimes some people have that fear too, of like, I'm going to have all this money out there just laying there waiting for a permit, and this permit's never going to come. And I think on our end of things, I think we do a really good job of getting that out there for people.
Any thoughts, Judy?
Repeat the question.
In terms of, you know, we work with a lot of folks in our office too that are going through this process, and you know, for a lot of people it's new having to apply for an operating permit through DEE or a CUP at the county level, and a lot of folks have apprehension or just kind of nervous about the project. What advice would you give folks that are apprehensive or that have some concerns about going through the process?
I think the biggest thing is communication. And like I said, get the application to me early. That way I have the opportunity to research it and probably find some facts that will be in their favor if I actually know what's going on in the project and have the detail behind it.
Absolutely. Dean, is there anything you want to share? I know you do this professionally and help people with this professionally, and as does your team. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we always try to coach our customers into understanding the process from one end to the other, and it's nothing to be worried about or afraid of. And once you get people over that apprehension, it's important. And I would commend Kai and his group. what they've done in the last couple of years of helping people understand the regulations, working with people with the regulations, have really bridged those gaps between maybe what they think is a fear with DEE to now what they're maybe seeing as an ally with DEE. So I really commend Kai and his group for bringing that type of attitude and mentality to the marketplace, if you will. And what he says is right. They've been working with producers, I think, better than they ever have in our 24-year history of working with them. And so that's a very positive thing. And then at the same time, I look at counties like Adams County and what Judy's doing there, and many other counties who are embracing livestock production more so than they ever have. And so we see a lot of positive things happening there as well. But it really goes back to getting a good application put together, being prepared with that application, communicating with your neighbors, and working through the process. And it's really not that difficult, and it just needs to be done methodically and done with a fair amount of conviction, because it can get a little dicey at times, but it usually works out just fine.
Sure. We do have one question that's been submitted by the audience, and Kai, what's the cost of applying for a DEE permit? You're cutting out from us.
There we go. Every time I unmute myself, we catch that just a little bit, but we'll get through it here. We'll start back at kind of the initial inspection side of things. If you're an operation that's looking to be a large, you're looking at a $500 fee to go out and get that initial inspection. If you're medium, you're looking at a $200 fee to get that inspection. And once you submit the application, there's a $200 application fee just to get the application in. So that's kind of where we set out with our fees, just for a construction and operating permit. Hog operations, we don't have to worry about the MPDS. That's a federal permit, too much with those. So we're not going to see anything for that on that side of things either.
Judy, the question was posed to Kai, but I'd let you speak to the cost and the fees at the county level there in Adams County, if you'd like.
In Adams County, a conditional use permit application fee is $175. I think most of us zoning administrators say that probably the cheapest stop that they're going to have is here at the zoning department.
It looks like we have another question from the audience. What is the separation distance between livestock operations? Does it matter the size and if they are indoors or outdoors?
I guess that's probably towards my end of things here.
Yeah.
I guess I'm kind of wondering if that's kind of geared towards like wells and or if there's like setbacks to cities or anything like that. On the state side of things, we don't have any separation towards like a town or anything like that. That's completely a local thing there. But a good source of some of the information you might be looking for is going to be Title 130, Chapter 9. That is a chapter that's specifically just about setback distances. And so when we're looking at wells, we're looking at from a livestock waste control facility, we're looking at 100 feet from there. But on the other side of that, you might want to look would be with Dave Misbach's group here at the department. He runs the state's drillers and all that kind of stuff there. So they have their own set of rules. Title 178, I think, is what they fall under. Dean, you might know that side a little bit better there, but they do have some regulations as far as how close a actual operation can be to wells and those kinds of setbacks as well too. We also look at a wellhead area as far as that goes. You know, we're looking at 1,000 feet. If we're at a public drinking water supply, those are kind of some of the setbacks that we're looking at there.
Great. Well, I think we're about at the end of our 30 minutes here. So I guess for a closing question, I guess I'd like to go through with each one of you, and if you could give one or two pieces of advice to livestock producers or operators of how they can be a good neighbor and improve their relationships within the community. So Dean, you want to lead us off?
Sure. I think, leading by example is always important. And what we say and do in our permit application process, whether it's at the county level or whether what we're providing to the state, and figuring out what does that mean long term to our community and to our environment, and making sure that we're a good neighbor. We're letting our neighbors know what we're doing, when we're doing it, and why we're doing it. Working with them as best we can. Some neighbors are easy to work with, and some are more difficult to work with, and that's part of life that we have to deal with. But you know, keeping those lines of communication. Things never get worse if you do that. Things only get worse if you don't communicate. And so making sure they understand what's happening and why it's happening. And eventually you may win them over, and they may be part of or you know, assisting with your livestock operation over time. And we've seen many cases where neighbors were originally against you know, a livestock operation, and a few years later they're either working with or working for that livestock facility. And so that's a victory, and that's a win. And you see that and you say, hey, you know, it can work. And so it's bringing people along, taking the time to make sure they understand what it is that that you're doing and why you're doing it, and that you're, you know, caring for livestock. And once you get through that process, that's all you can do. You may not win everybody, but you'll win a lot of them by doing that.
Kai, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo a lot what Dean just said there, but I think, and I'm guessing it's probably been said multiple times on this little webinar that you guys have had here, but education with the neighbors around you is a big portion of it too, because everybody kind of has a preconceived notion of what a CAFO is and what's coming in next to them. But I think that there's been so much technology, just even over the last few years, that has really changed and revolutionized the industry just in general, that what they have in their mind is not remotely close to what's coming in next door to them. So I think there's a lot of it just working with your neighbors and just kind of just giving them an opportunity to ask their questions and just being patient with them. And then even on the state side of things is when you're going through just getting your permits, like I said earlier, you know, we're not bad people. We're just wanting to make sure that we get you set up the best that we can to get you in a position that you can win with your operation too. So.
Thank you. Judy?
I'd have to echo the same things that both of these gentlemen have said. Yeah, communication with everyone, being a part of the community. I listened to the last panel discussion. I was really excited to hear about what they're doing in Broken Bow area and teaching and educating people and having courses at Mid-Plains. That's really exciting. I just think agriculture is exciting and being a part of it. I mean, we have DNA research going on here in Adams County, and it's exciting that I was a part of that to create that building there, that the permitting process came through me. I think continued education on that, what's out there, the technology that's been created, what we've learned about how to reduce dust, how to get rid of odor. I mean, that preconceived notion that was out there in the past, I think it's so different than what it really is.
I think that you're absolutely right, and appreciate your insight, Judy. Well, we are about to 1:30, so again, want to thank you guys, Dean, Kai, Judy, for your involvement and your participation on this panel. I think some great insight and great perspective. You know, if anyone has questions of any of these folks, their contact information is available in the program, and we can sure share that again. And this program will be archived if anyone wants to view it. So thank you, guys.